Okay. So again, thank you for choosing us. This is the EDP panel discussion. And I am sitting here with Julia Ayeni, currently the project manager at OEWD for the Economic Recovery,
And
and
regeneration.
Regeneration team. Julia co-managed the research, drafting, and community engagement for the Equitable Development Plan of India Basin. Chika Mezie. She's a business owner, born and raised in San Francisco, community advocate and leader. Her brand PopCo, Product of Power, aims to inspire and uplift the people. And Phil Ginsburg, the general manager of SF Park and Rec and Park. I always mix that up. Phil, can you give us an overview of how the concept of the Equitable Development Plan, what was that, 2008, 17, 18?
Yeah. So a little context setting for India Basin. I alluded to it during my remarks this morning, but I really believe that this is San Francisco's most important park project. And I say that with great respect to all of the work we're doing all over that we are all doing all over the city. But I feel like you get an opportunity, a city gets an opportunity for a project like this once in a generation or a lifetime, if we're lucky. This is 1.7 miles of waterfront open space in a community that has been, historically and systematically cut off from many of the programs and services of our city, that is situated, in between a power plant, a wastewater treatment plant, is on the east side of two highways, has a significant amount of public housing, and has just frankly been historically ignored or just more aggressively discriminated against. And we have a moment, to do what's right for this community, to refreshen the coastline, to create access, to build community, health, safety, all these things. But I think somebody asked a question when CJ was giving her keynote about the construct of green displacement and green gentrification. It's a real thing. And the theory behind green displacement was really, believe it or not, born from mistakes that were unintentionally made when the High Line was created in New York City. That was the first time. It was maybe not the first time, but it was sort of recognized as a thing. Like, oh my God, we built this beautiful space. People have come. Home ownership, the price of homes have gone up. The price of for the rental community has gone up. We have, chased out existing neighborhoods and existing communities and welcome new people, right? And so our challenge with this space was to figure out how we work with the community to do something that's super important, right? We don't want to get to the point in the world where we're like, we really don't want that. And yet, as this project emerged, and I think, Chika can, speak to this a little bit because this is her community, like, we were a little surprised by a little bit of the lukewarm response to the project. And I think that there was some concern, frankly, about who were we doing this project for? And that, out of that and out of lessons learned from the High Line and another project, which is sort of a mentory type project for us in the District of Columbia called the 11th Street Bridge Project, where the District of Columbia is making a park out of an old decommissioned bridge across the Anacostia River and connecting Wards 7 and 8 in DC, which have a lot of the same social demographics and challenges as exists in the Bayview. And that community didn't want their project either, and they were like, people are just going to come across the bridge and you're going to chase us out even further. So the Equitable Development Plan, sorry to be so long-winded, Maya, but I can actually talk about this project for about 9 hours straight, so I don't know how much time you all have. But the Equitable Development Plan was born out of an acknowledgement that we needed to work more deeply and more closely with the Bayview community and create transparent, accountable commitments that this park is being built not for who might come, but for who lives there now. And that is, and to be even, sort of more blunt about it, our mission of this project, we have a couple of different goals. One, we are very intentionally and openly trying to create and build a black space. That is what we want there. A safe black space that honors the Bayview community's incredible culture and history and heritage. And then if we are going to go and try to do this big project and try to figure out how to invest over $150 million in this space, we want to make sure every single penny of that is leveraging benefits for the existing community. So that means who's designing the project, who's working on it, who's going to program the space, who's going to take care of the space, right? We have a fundraising consultant. This is a kind of a sweet story. We have a fundraising consultant who's working with us. It's a public-private partnership, about $75 million of public investment, $75 million in philanthropy that we need. And we're, as Drew alluded to earlier, we're well on our way. But even, so we put out an RFP to bring in a consultant to help us raise money. And we asked the consultant that we selected, we wanted commitments from them. Because again, we're trying to leverage the money we're giving to the consultant to benefit the community. So what did we do? We asked them to hire a Bayview resident as a development intern who has worked with them now for 2 years. Daryl's a rising senior at San Jose State. And our hope is that he will either be permanently hired by CCS or he's going to be hired by Rec and Park. And if not, yeah, without a doubt, he's fantastic. And then the other thing we've asked CCS to do was they hosted a seminar for Bayview-based nonprofits on how to raise money and how to fundraise. And then they also have a bank of consulting hours. So even that investment, we're trying to leverage for the benefit of the existing community. So the Equitable Development Plan is this series of commitments that we spent 2 years working on with, this was facilitated by Jackie Flynn and by Chika and by APRI, their community leaders and nonprofit leaders. Julia worked on the drafting of this plan for quite a while, and it was hard, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you should see copies of it. And honestly, like we do a lot of plans, we're parks, we plan a lot. I am as proud of that hard copy thing that some of you are looking at as I am of anything. That document is, yes, I am very proud of that, and now the work really continues to implement it.
Thanks, Phil.
I can stay for a little bit because we had an empty chair. So.
Okay. All right. Chika, the next question's for you.
All right.
As a community member, what was your opinion initially of the India Basin Equitable Development Plan, and what is it now and its potential impact?
Well, when I first heard about the project, like Phil said, I was a bit hesitant because we don't really get the chance to have a voice when it comes to all these big major projects coming to the Bayview. And I'm a Bayview native and resident, so when I heard about the EDP group, I was actually glad that they wanted our voices to be heard. And EDP to me means equity and having a chance for our ideas to be implemented in these new spaces that are coming to the Bayview.
Okay, so Julia, can we take a step back and share an overview of the drafting process with us?
Ooh, where do we start? So, as Chika and Phil, alluded to, this document is holding a lot. It's balancing a lot. We had both the perspective of having different academic underpinnings. There's a lot of research that's been done, and that's still emerging on green gentrification and displacement, and the variety of case studies. As Phil mentioned, the 11th Street Bridge Park was a really massive massive project that we looked up to in a variety of ways, not just the structure of the document itself, but the longevity of the project and the legacy that it has and its continued engagement, and its, promise of resource allocation. So, we're trying to hold that. We're also, trying to hold and really elevate the voices and lived experiences of, the folks who live in Bayview Hunters Point, specifically people who, are living quite close to the park, and we want to understand in terms of vision and identity, how they want to see that play out. Arts and culture are a great place to start, but we want to think bigger and think about the local economy and scaling those economies over time. So, we have the case studies, the academia, we have the lived experiences, but something that was a little tricky was realizing that there are so many different on-ramps for understanding these concepts. Some people just don't even know what gentrification is, like point blank. They don't understand these concepts of displacement, let alone, having to go over the whole history of India Basin and Hunters Point specifically, and the environmental racism, and there's a lot of ground to cover. And it's equally as important to acknowledge the history of this space and the people who have made this place what it is, and that those identities are so crucial to what we're trying to build now. So, we took, when I say we, I guess I should mention my co-author, Omar Davis, who's a project manager for Rec Park, and we had 3 academic advisors from San Francisco State, Kim Moore-Bailey, Audrey Jones-Taylor, and the late Dr. Nina Roberts, and they were completely just instrumental to really not just honing the scope of this document. Yeah. Oh, I miss Nina. Just so integral to the shaping of this document and, giving its validity, not just like academically, but, to make sure that we were hitting all the different points of highlighting the historic underpinnings of this community. And so we started, Phil penned a really beautiful introduction, took a really hardcore stab at the beginning of this document, and we could not have, really started the drafting of the rest of the document without that north arrow. So thank you for that. And we really did use that kind of context for the community to start just drafting the 6 sections. And I'm getting into the leadership committee in just a second. So just for context, if you don't have a document in front of you, the 6 sections are arts, culture, and identity, workforce and business development, connectivity, transit, access and safety, healthy communities and ecology, youth opportunities, and housing security. And you might hear some of those sections and think, what's the relevance for, this is a park, why are we talking about housing security? And again, if you read the document and ask us lots of questions, they're all interwoven. It's quality of life and how this major historical, or unprecedented, I guess, development will affect each of those areas. So, and those areas were elevated and validated by our leadership committee, which was comprised of, I'm going to say like 20? Okay. 20 community members who represented a just huge array of residents and folks who work and own businesses in Bayview Hunters Point. Really, really incredible community leaders, folks who are just, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I could go down the list of all the different things that they're involved in. So APRI, and more notably Jackie Flynn, Executive Director of APRI, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today. She did a tremendous job at facilitating the leadership committee meetings, and so after we would go and take a stab at drafting these sections, which was usually me and Omar doing a ton of research and slamming on the keyboard for a while, we would turn that over to the fabulous team at APRI and put that out for input, and that's when we had a lot of the coloring in of really beautiful lived experience and input to really ground truth a lot of what we wrote, and that continued on for about 6 sections until we had an EDP.
Nice. A follow-up to that would be, how did you choose the sections? You talked about it a little bit, but how did you even start to choose the sections with so many kind of societal, kind of socioeconomic issues presenting? How did you choose just those?
So, a bit of my background. So, I did a master's in urban regeneration, and for during that program, that was kind of a crash course in like master plan drafting a lot of times. And full disclosure, as a former like sociology major and just like social justice warrior anyway, my whole purview was about like the social and economic angle for master planning. So I took, Omar and myself and obviously our academic advisors kind of just started from like the basics of like what dictates quality of life. Housing security, especially in San Francisco, is kind of at the top of the list, and transit like hit the mark.
But Julia, I think it's probably important or fair to say that those strategies that are identified in the plan were really what we were hearing from our leadership
Oh,
team.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
I was going to say a
think
whole
that,
section came out of like youth opportunities was something that we hadn't even.
yes. So I think all of the and obviously we were, during all these meetings, we were hearing feedback, and then the amazing work that you and Omar did which was to channel what we were hearing and then try to actualize it in the form of a sort of a more formal policy document.
Right.
But I think that unless I misunderstood the question, but I think it's important for everybody to understand that these what's in the report, the strategies, the initiatives, they all come from community, and what we were hearing was important to try to tackle to ensure that this project and this effort stood the best chance of mitigating any of the negative impacts of such a consequential investment.
Absolutely. I was like just about to say, a lot of times we did end up, taking a pretty hard left or a hard right, and a lot of the assumptions that we did put out there, academia doesn't write the rule book, and it shouldn't write the rule book. So, I couldn't have said it better.
Right. Chika, what was it like being an APRI staff member during this process? Like I think the thing that kind of is glaring is the voice of the community. And oftentimes I think being the first to hear a thing, on the side or in a phone conversation or an email, do you feel like you had to translate what was coming from the community, or was it just like a straight funnel?
Well, just being an APRI staff member and working within my community, people had a lot to say about what was going on and what they've experienced growing up in Bayview Hunters Point, like their family, them and their ancestors, people who've lived in that area. They had a lot to share, and I would just say that as a staff member, it was inspirational to hear these stories, but it was also really tough, especially during the pandemic. I remember we first started the focus groups pre-pandemic, and then we had to completely stop because, all the guidelines and people had to stay home. It was a completely different dynamic. But in the process and trying to keep things going, I would say that we're pretty resilient, and I feel like APRI has always been resilient, trying to keep things moving and going despite all the hardships that we face in the Bayview and in the city in general, and just being a small nonprofit all around. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm also really new to this, so you guys bear with me. I'm not really
You're doing
into panel
great. You're
speaking.
doing
I'm
great.
more of like the young advocate, trying to fight for my, my community and my.
We would have never
Other young
known
people.
that you're new
Yeah.
to this.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one more question, then we'll open it up for question and answers. So folks, if you want to start jotting any answers or thoughts that have come up. I want to hear from each of you kind of what is the top of mind for successes thus far on the EDP, because we're not even we're beginning implementation, but I think it's good to to know what you feel like has been amazing. Chika, you want to start?
I guess I can start. I would say some of the successes have been the community events that have happened. Like you said, the Mardi Gras, we've had a movie night out at the park during the pandemic, so we've had a bunch of people show up to the park in the middle, well, not in the middle of the night, but during the evening, outside, blankets on the ground, just being there in that space and enjoying the space. And I would say just creating an overall equal and equitable plan. It speaks for itself, but honestly, just the fact that you guys had a bunch of community leaders and people who've lived there throughout their whole entire lives be a part of the conversation. And I think that's big when it comes to these projects. Like I said, our voices are important, and a lot of times they get overlooked. They get overlooked. So the success is having us be a part of the conversation and having a seat at the table.
Well, I'd say, for past successes, absolutely building on what you said, Chika. It's been the slow but steady, I've been seeing just the increase in building trust, and that, this is a community that has every right to distrust, a lot of the folks on our team or the team who, are trying to come in and do this project, but the fact that the community is still coming out to events, there's so much engagement from the leadership committee, and it's honestly one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen, and it's very humbling, and I'm very appreciative. So that's been a past indicator of success, and for me, what I would consider a future indicator of success is the long-term commitment and holding these relationships, because this community deserves that, and that to me is the biggest way to ensure that these resources actually are delivered and realized. It comes down to the individuals who are a part of the city and who are part of the various community organizations who are committed to, being a part of this project for the long term. So the longer that we see people sticking around and really fighting for the good cause, the better.
Yeah, it's been pretty exciting. I mean, the plan itself is a milestone because it's a strategic plan and it's a roadmap for how and what we want to accomplish in the project. But as I flip through it, I'm so proud of the fact that a number of the initiatives that are in that plan are already sort of in progress. Right now, there are job training programs happening to prepare local residents to be part of the construction team for when the 900 Innis project starts. I mentioned earlier during my remarks the Learn to Swim partnership with the Bayview YMCA to make sure that people feel safe around the water. A lot of the, Chika mentioned a lot of the interim activation efforts are designed to really create what I hope will be a Black culture zone at India Basin. So there's a lot that actually has been happening. We have the Sankofa markets, which are an effort at sort of kernels of creating economic opportunity and future opportunities for people to be to either sell food or crafts in the park. So I think that that's an important piece. We have our nature play area that we did over at Heron's Head, which is really lovely, which ties into a lot of the youth development work. So, I mean, there's a number of different initiatives already in there that are already starting. And so it's pretty exciting. And, there are other efforts like this around the city. This is a certain scale and we're following a certain rhythm, but I definitely want to give a shout out to the Buchanan Mall project because frankly, India Basin is learning some things from the Buchanan Mall work about how to engage and involve community in an important development project. It's very hard when you have so many amazing children and you love them all, so it's hard to single anyone out, but we're talking about India Basin today, but Buchanan Mall is another equitable development planning effort as well.
Thank you. So we got some really good questions here. Let's start with, how did this project change the way you think about expertise and where to find it?
I'd like to answer, if you don't mind, I'd like to answer that one. Because one of the things that we are doing in this project is we actually are providing stipends and actually paying our community leaders to participate in this process. Because, when I go to a community planning meeting to work on a park project, I'm getting paid, right? It's my job. And so we wanted to acknowledge the expertise that our community leaders have in shaping design and program and in planning the space. So I mean, I think we have sort of flipped the switch. And then the other thing is that, you know, we always go through some form of community concept design. It's rare that any public space gets developed without community input, but there is, this project includes what I would describe for the Parks Department, a relinquishing of sort of the traditional power structure. You know, we're the land manager, we have the charter mandated authority to do this park, we have a lot of the funding, and so usually we really drive. And we are learning how to try to step back a little bit and let APRI drive and let the community drive. And so we are more sort of trying to serve and support.
Agreed. I'm also.
And letting Maya drive, by the way. 'Cause,
I realized I didn't introduce myself.
yeah, oh.
I'm Maya
is Maya.
Rogers. I'm the senior project manager for the India Basin project as well as the Blue Greenway.
And by the way, if I could sort of celebrate Maya a little bit, another kernel, early kernel of our India Basin efforts was Hilltop Park, which is also in the Bayview. And Maya was at the time not a member of the Parks Alliance, but she as a community member had started something called Parks 94124. And Hilltop was a project, a partnership between the Recreation Park Department, the Trust for Public Land and Community. And that was the beginning of a journey in which, you know, Rec and Park is sort of learning when it needs to kind of step back, and Maya was very much of a leader in that effort. And there was a commitment with TPL to hire locally and to get community a little bit more involved in design than perhaps was a traditional model. And so some of you see some of the seeds from that effort. Most importantly, Maya now having a big, huge, important job at the San Francisco Parks Alliance and being, she's kind of my boss, so I do what she says.
He's too kind. I'm still serving, Another question. How do we extend this roadmap to Candlestick Park, to sister neighborhoods, and thinking about the new development at Sledge Lock, which I think we all locally kind of called it, but I think it's called Baylands and Yik Oi Hang Peace and Friendship Park. Please correct me if I said that wrong.
I'm happy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Can you repeat the question, just from the top?
So I think this question is just asking about how do we recreate projects like this, right? And so I think I think the biggest thing is looking at the model for engagement and for working with, bringing in resources if required. I think the biggest thing to recreate this model across kind of D10 or just the city, I think is to really look at how we engage with the community. It takes a little longer to engage with the community, but I think the rewards are much, much greater in the way of really hearing people. And I think, traditionally we want to plan. We want to plan and we want to we know what we want in the park, but we really have to be flexible enough to say, well, if the community doesn't want it, they won't own it, and then they won't take care of it, right? And so thinking about all that, I think Viz Valley is a neighbor, and so I think it's easy to recreate this in Viz Valley at some point. But I think before we plan to do a thing, we have to talk to the community about what they want, what they need,
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what Maya's saying, trust, of course, is one of the biggest things when it comes to planning these big projects. If the community does not trust you, they won't support you. So it's best to build those relationships ahead of time and early, have them be a part of the planning and conceptual design process of things, and you'll have better turnout, When they feel heard, they're gonna respond and support you. And that's just for me being a community member. So if people are coming into my community, I wanna know who they are, who are who are all of the players in this process, and I want to be a part of it. Let me be heard. I have to trust you first, of course, but yeah.
I had one thing that I wanted to tack on as well, and a major lesson learned from this project is exceptionally strong leadership, consistent leadership, someone who understands the realities of, with great power and leadership and financing comes great responsibility, which is using it equitably. So, we need that steel thread running through.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you, Julie. I wanted to just respond to the candlestick piece. I mean, I do think equitable development planning is an emerging best practice, right? So this is, and it's new. I mean, I think we're maybe a little bit behind, and we're inspired by our friends at 11th Street Bridge, and there are a small number of similar equitable development planning efforts around the country, but we're very early. We are early adapters of this emerging best practice, national best practice. And so, and by the way, that comes with making lots and lots and lots of mistakes, right? So we have to be okay making mistakes. So I just kind of want to get that out of the way because, we're all human beings and we're all new at, sort of, this is a different way of thinking and sharing power or where government divests its power, from its power a little bit. It's just different. And so, I mean, I hope that this does become a way of future park development in and around San Francisco. It's hard, it's long, it's expensive, so it's not easy. And I think while many projects are right for it, it's not necessarily true that all projects are right for it. But I think Candlestick State Park in particular, and my other hat is as a State Parks Commissioner, is a space that I think we as San Franciscans really need to start to think more and more about. And there are some people in this room that have been thinking a lot about Candlestick for a long time, right? So I acknowledge that, but I think as a city, this is as important of a state park as any in the entire state of California. And we need to help our state, and our state needs to work more closely with us to be better there. And I look forward to thinking about how we do that. And maybe some lessons learned from India Basin, maybe Candlestick has a different model. There's an effort underway up in Marin, up north, called One TAM, that is a really interesting collaboration of nonprofits and different sister agencies. And maybe that there's a similar model for Candlestick. But as we work on India Basin, and if you've all ever pushed a big heavy boulder uphill, it's really hard. It's even harder to do two heavy boulders at the same time. So, but as we continue our work at India Basin, we recognize it's all part of the Blue Greenway, right? Like, Candlestick is right around the bend. And so we should be thinking about and figuring out how to make this model and extend this model to work at Candlestick in particular.
That's great. So another question. How do you balance, we had a lot of questions. I apologize in advance if we can't get to them all. We're coming up on about 15 minutes left in the session. How do you balance the goals of the Equitable Development Plan with the demands of developer?
This is a question for these two.
I was going to say,
I think I'm going to sit out on this one.
My job was the aspirational, and Phil's job was to negotiate that.
Sure. Well, let's take that one head on, because I actually think
I know.
we have on site, I think, a pretty socially responsible developer. There's still a long way to go on that project, but they are the Build Inc., which often gets confused and maybe was one of the reasons that the park project was treated with less sort of passion and enthusiasm, because there's also a development on one of the near one of the waterfront parcels, 700 Innis, that I think is slated for, is it 3,000 units of housing?
It's a lot
Okay, so it's a lot of housing. And there was a development agreement with the city that Amy Cohen's shop, worked on. And that developer, again, there's a long way to go for that project, and there's a long way to go for our project. But so far, I do think that developer has leaned into this equitable development planning model and embraced it. So I'm optimistic about that. The development agreement, not really my purview, but I know that they're very, 35% affordable. They're focused on creating a campus for community to support community nonprofits. And significantly, one of the benefits of that development is they are taking our space, and if you look in the document, you'll see a map of the area. There's an area that is south of 900 Innis called India Basin Open Space. That currently belongs within the jurisdiction of the Recreation and Park Department. It's passive open space. There's no program on it. It was the result of the runway mitigation project out at the airport many years ago. And it has been a very underperforming space. So Build has committed to take that space and then take, I think it's, and that's about 4 to 5 acres and of land, and they want to take that space and then combine it with an adjacent 5 or 6 acres. So I think because the whole park is, that whole section of the park is going to be about 12 acres, and they with us are working on an open space development project, which they then are going to get back to the city. So the housing is set back from the water a little bit. So they do very much have an open space focus. I think, look, they're developers. It's a for-profit company. If it doesn't pencil, they're not going to end up building. So we acknowledge that. But I think they have done some things that I hope the community sees as relatively respectful of it. I know that, Chika, that they've worked with APRI on a lot of community engagement. They have supported our equitable development planning efforts. One of their principals comes to all the meetings. So I'm hopeful.
Great. This question is super relevant, so I think I'm going to. Knowing that, I can't read the word, but an outreach takes time, how do you manage the frustration of the communities that have been neglected for a long time and want to see change happen fast, but the process to build a park like this takes years? Can I answer?
Go ahead.
Yes, Maya, you answer.
Literally an expert.
So in Bayview, I don't need to go into the history of Bayview for you all. Many years of disinvestment, like Phil said, and Chika and Julia, right? When Parks 94124 began wanting to work on parks, someone told me, well, by the time you're done with this park, Hilltop Park, your daughter is going to be too old to play in it. And I remember being like, what? They're very close. She was probably about 8. That's exaggeration. But I think people are super intelligent, and when you give them a realistic timeline of projects, and you do interim activation, right? Which we're doing right now at India Basin Shoreline Park. You do interim activation, you do work days, you do all this work, and you do updates for folks to let them know where you are in the process. I think they are willing to wait, quite frankly, right? So 5 years for a park is kind of the running timeline, unless it's 15 acres. For Hilltop, it was about 5 years, but I think it's important to just be as transparent as possible so people don't think you're kind of stringing them along. Anyone else?
Hit the nail on the head with the interim activation, and at India Basin especially, or India Basin Shoreline Park, the tech hub is such a solid resource. It's a much needed aspect of interim activation. So, I think that's just another indication that you're actually listening, and the things that you're delivering for interim activation are relevant and wanted and are going to be continually used. So as long as you keep it high quality, that's going to help a lot.
And it helps if they mirror what's going to be in the space too.
Yeah, just to add on to what they're saying, I completely agree. I think that when the community is, like I said before, part of the process, and when we do have these community events, we get to be transparent on that timeline. You get to let them know how long it actually does take to plan and design a park, and also just keeping them engaged throughout the process. That's all you really have to do. As long as you're keeping the community engaged and inform them ahead of time, let them know what this process will take to get to that finish line, it'll be okay. It may be a long time, it may be a little bit of a wait, but at least they're still a part of that process.
And it won't, it doesn't stop the frustration and distrust totally, but it helps with the constant communication. It can help with that.
It's a start. It's definitely a start.
How do we attract charitable dollars to a part of the city that has been historically underserved? Phil Ginsburg.
I would love to learn that process as a young leader.
Well, to the good, I think there is a lot of commitment in the philanthropic and foundation community to invest in communities that have been historically underserved. So I actually think that we're seeing more opportunity for investments in spaces like this in the foundation world. Now, you know, obviously you look at some of the stuff happening in Golden Gate Park, and if you go to the Presidio and tunnel tops, of course, you know, people with, you know, and families with capacity that do charitable giving, they're gonna be sort of most focused on the spaces that they know, right? That's just sort of natural, right? Everybody has a deep sense of place and commitment to the spaces that, you know, that either they visit or that they use, right? So there is a little bit of, you know, one of the most inspiring moments on this project was we had the lead donor, and I'm gonna give him a shout out, is a gentleman by the name of John Pritzker. And you know, John's been very, very successful in life. His family's been very successful in life, and he's very, very, very philanthropic. And he was asked to support the tunnel tops effort in the Presidio, which is going to be lovely, right? Fine. It's already a great space. It's going to be even better. And the question he asked is, well, if I'm going to do this, you know, shouldn't we be also supporting something in a different neighborhood? And in a neighborhood that doesn't have the same opportunity. And so he and his foundation reached out to us. They knew about this project in part because I talk about it with every waking breath. And John was, you know, considered a very significant gift, but it did not actually come to fruition until John came to the Bayview, and Jackie and I stepped back, right? Which is not something that's easy for me, you know, donor stewardship. I micromanage my donors and those relationships, but I stepped back, and Jackie took John on a, you know, 2 or 3 hour tour around the Bayview. And that was a really important moment for him, and obviously I think it was for Jackie too. And you know, John made a $25 million leadership gift to this project, which is really extraordinary. And so we are beginning a campaign, and we have a big event at Heron's Head on May 23rd. We have a campaign cabinet that includes some philanthropic leaders, some civic leaders, and community representatives all working together. So we have community representatives on our campaign committee, and we have a kickoff on May 23rd, and it's very important that people see the space. And it's stunning to me, you know, how people have lived in the city. Some people have lived in the city all their lives and never been in the Bayview. How's that possible? But it is. And when people come to the Bayview and they see its rich history and culture and beautiful views and incredible open space, actual open space and open space potential, they understand. But I think that there has been a lot of sort of reckoning in the philanthropic community about impact and where is there going to be the most impact. And San Francisco's very lucky. We're a very generous city. And, but we have to communicate about the project. We have to do our homework. Donors want to see that we've thought through the project. Donors want to see that there's public investment. And for us, I think, and there are different types of donors. There are donors that believe in parks and open space, and then there are donors that believe in housing security and social justice and health. And so the Equitable Development Plan actually marriages this open space opportunity with other really important social goals that ultimately attempt to close the gaps in social determinants of health. And so we're waiting for our next John Pritzker, but we will find her.
Yeah. We have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to get some of the quick questions. There are some really good questions in here about gentrification and the housing displacement that we hope to mitigate. And I encourage folks to send us emails, you know, if for whatever, any other questions, and I'll be hanging around, and Julia probably, I think Phil has to run, but please reach out to us. We're always here for questions. What does APRI stand for?
APRI stands for the A. Philip Randolph Institute of San Francisco.
And who was A. Philip Randolph?
Asa Philip Randolph was one of the historic leaders, and he helped organize all of the Pullman porters, back during the Civil Rights Movement. He was also one of the people who are the hidden heroes that helped organize the March on Washington.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, he's great.
Okay, any parting words?
Well, just based on what Chika talking about A. Philip Randolph, a very interesting feature of this project is, and it gets back to the philanthropy and the fundraising, is we all know that sometimes, you know, donors or foundations like to see their names on things. But one of the important values of this project is that APRI is working with the Bayview Historical Society and our EDP leadership team to identify people that the community wants to honor and celebrate in our spaces. So that when, for those donors, and not all donors insist on their names on things, but when donors want some recognition, this project is going to involve create a list of heroes to the community that the community wants to honor, and then the donor gets to pick which story resonates. So you will not see a donor's name sprinkled over the space. You may see, instead of seeing John Pritzker Plaza, you may see the A. Philip Randolph Plaza. And if John is not someone who likes his name on things, God bless him, but if he wanted his name on it, it would say A. Philip Randolph Plaza, and then in tiny little font, presented by John Pritzker. So that is just a way of creating connection, because if we're saying that this is a space for the community, and the community comes into the space and sees names of people that they don't know, that don't resonate, that aren't significant, then we're not walking the talk, are we? So that, I think that's also a very unique feature of the project.
Great. Any other parting words?
Yes. The EDP, the Equitable Development Plan, is a guide. And it's not supposed to live on a shelf. And it has wonderful information, but it's the people who are going to be fighting and pushing to provide resources to realize these initiatives. That's how this is going to happen. This vision can be realized. This was drafted with the realistic expectation that this community deserves the resources that are set out here, and they can be delivered. So it's not supposed to be an exclusive group. Anybody has the power to join and to support the development of this park.
One final ask, I would advise you all to come over to the Bayview and see the park. And bring your guides with you so you can actually understand and visualize what we see and what we want the future of the park to look like. And we have open arms, so just come on through, say hi, or you can stop by APRI, which is located at 1301 Evans Avenue. I'm going to throw that in there, or you can look us up online and continue the conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.